Ladies and gentlemen, who'd you talk to? That's the first time I ever said, who'd you talk to? It's kind of exciting to say it. This is Coach TJ. This is Bar Fongool. This is August 26th. We're going to have so much fun tonight. They put me in charge of the bar. These guys are nuts. Absolutely crazy. I actually have a beer for Bar Fongool. Look at this. Pumpkin beer. And I am not basic. So I don't do like the basic pumpkin shit, but I figured they're going to let me host one time. I'm going to do the best I can. Speaking of pumpkins, King Mike.
Yeah.
You into the pumpkin shit?
No pumpkin coffee, no pumpkin beer, no pumpkin anything. No pumpkin pie, no pumpkin. Not a pumpkin.
First of all, I don't know where they came up with the flavor of pumpkin because a pumpkin tastes like nothing that the flavor is. It's like blue raspberry. There is no blue raspberry. So they just made up a flavor and they're like, we're going to call it this.
And you remember when you were dating and they'd be like, oh, let's carve a pumpkin. And you're thinking to yourself, I'm just going to be reaching my hand in and pulling out seeds and gunk for like 20 minutes so you can make this dumb face and put a candle in it.
So when Tommy was a baby, Tommy's 7 now, but when he was a baby, I bought the biggest pumpkin I could get. I gutted the whole thing. And my idea was I'm going to put the baby in the pumpkin. I'm going to take a picture. It's going to go on every Christmas card. I don't have to buy anything. I put that kid in that slimy pumpkin. He cried. Like he stopped crying like 6 months ago because it was so gross. I can't believe I did it. But
did DCYF knock on the door the minute he touched the pumpkin? The minute he dropped inside? Like
I got too many signs for DCYF to come by this house. But I'll tell you this. You know what we're going to do, King Mike? We're going to talk about a couple things tonight. Fantasy football game theory, which is awesome.
All right.
So when you're talking about game theory, you need a genius.
You would.
You would need a genius because me and you theory, Genius Kev, game theory sounds like a perfect fit. Genius Kev, hello.
Hey, good evening, Coach TJ. Good to see you behind the bar. I'm already doing I'm doing Bar Fongool game theory right now. You guys have no idea what's going on. But speaking of just messed up flavors, this is a berry pomegranate Mio squeeze. I don't know what that is. I don't know what it is, honestly, but it works with water. Works if you add a little vodka to it. So I'm ready to have a couple of drinks and talk game theory.
I'll tell you what's terrible. Last night I come in the house. Wow, look, that looks fancy.
Oh, it's fucking delicious. I mean, it's
freaking
delicious.
Right? So I'm driving home. I had like a 35-minute ride home, and it was 100 degrees here in Rhode Island yesterday. And I'm driving home. All I wanted was water. I get in the house. I barely say hi to my family. I go to the fridge. I take the biggest sip of water. They bought that damn flavored water with no color. Disgusting, especially if you're expecting actual water. And I got like great Propel water. I wanted to kill somebody. But anyway.
Have any of you guys ever been in a position where you went to grab your beer and there was a cigarette butt in it and it wasn't your beer? Has that happened to you guys?
College. That is college.
That was when I think back about the band days, that's one of the thoughts I immediately have is grabbing a beer and going and having a cigarette butt hit your lips. And just the disgustingness that you feel at that moment. It's just like, because first of all, I want to smash anybody in the face who drops their cigarette in a beer and just leaves it there as if it's like a floater. Like, throw that away. All right? A jerk. You put your cigarette out in it. If I put a cigar out in a bottle, I'd tip it over. I'd throw it away. I wouldn't leave it there like it's a little message for somebody to come find. That's just a jerk move to make. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm mad I didn't know you in the band days, though, because I feel like bands, that must have been so much fun. And then what was that, the 90s?
Oh, boy. That was like 94 to 2007, I think.
Oh, good, because later we're going to talk about 90s basketball. But we're going to have some banned words, which is going to be interesting. And I really hope Brother Ray jumps on because 90s basketball without the special words is going to be an interesting conversation. But
Brother Ray was getting into his 50s, right? Back in the 90s. So he might not remember that much. Where he is now.
Actually, that might be the last era he does remember.
That's true. That is true.
So I want to ask you guys about this, right? So we're all getting ready for our fantasy drafts. And I'm going to just go off the predisposition that we're in 12-team leagues. Fair enough?
Yep. Yeah. All right. Fair enough.
If you're in an 8-team league, I don't really care about your team. If you're in a 15-team league, that's a whole different thing. But you read about when you're getting ready for your drafts, different fantasy approaches to how you're going to approach the draft. So it used to be when we were younger, everybody took running back, first 2 rounds. That was like almost automatic. And then now a lot of it shifted to people that go with the 0 running back theory. Are you familiar with this theory?
Oh, yeah, I love it. Yeah.
Don't like it.
Good. Kev, tell me about the 0 running back theory and why I should consider it. And I have the 7th pick in my draft.
So the whole thing around it, like without spending the whole hour talking about it, because you can listen to 6 hours of podcasts just about the theory. But basically, running backs are very, very fluky on who's going to do well, and you can't always guarantee performance based on the prior year. And they also have a very high rate of injury, and there's very few bell cow running backs. So once you get out of Zeke, Derrick Henry, a few others that get all their carries, like the CMC, Dalvin Cook, there's all the rest of them are almost crapshoots. Whereas you could load up on a bunch of like top tier wide receivers that get consistently a lot more targets. The injury rates are lower. They actually end up scoring more points, and your team has more options to more sort of paths to victory. Now, the whole thing is, if you're not in the PPR league, the strategy falls apart. So you have to be in PPR or half PPR to even consider it. So what you would do, and there's modified RB, there's modified 0 RB because a lot of people are afraid to do it, but traditional RB 0 RB is you don't take a running back until like the 6th round maybe, which is crazy. And then what you're looking for is pass catchers in platoon situations, rookies that have upside, all a bunch of long shot like lottery tickets that you hope some will hit. But in the meantime, you're churning out 4 amazing wide receivers a week. Every single week you're just pounding wide receiver points, especially in PPR. So that's it at a very, very high level.
Mike, what do you think about that kind of idea?
Well, so there's a limited value. There's a limited amount of running backs. There is a extremely large amount of wide receivers, right? So if you can get one of the great running backs early, you take them, you say thank you, and you move on, because it gets to a certain point where it's a drop off dramatically. Wide receivers, that's the curve, as they say now in the news. The curve is a lot higher and sustains for a while with wide receivers. You've got a lot more to pick from. Plus, I'm a big fan of like predicting that 3rd-year wide receiver or 2nd-year wide receiver that's going to explode in a new position, or that he's just develops more. So I don't know, man. I don't like the idea of just not taking running backs. If you can get one of the best guys, you take them. You just take them.
I think, Kev, correct me if I'm wrong, the people who subscribe to the 0 running back theory, they're always talking about it outside of, say, the top 6 picks. Like,
no,
I don't really think anyone's going to take the 1st pick or the 2nd pick and decide I'm going to punt on Dalvin Cook or McCaffrey or whoever, Elliott, whoever it happens to be. Really?
It's probably only the top 2 or 3. I would say at pick 4 it starts to switch, because you look like the whole thing is the odds of wasting your high round picks. Last year, if you drafted Zeke 5th and you could have had Devontae Adams, your whole season is effed. If you drafted CMC, I don't think last season he was 1 or 2, but like where you drafted Barkley, like the top running backs get hurt at a higher rate than the wide receivers. So and then there's also guys on the running back side that come out of nowhere. Like let's say you took James Robinson in like the 11th round last year. He could make your team. You took Myles Gaskin very late. They could make up for not picking a running back in round 2, 3, 4 because you put all lottery tickets out kind of all over the place on running backs, and your wide receivers have a lower risk of completely losing a season for you. That's the theory.
My brother-in-law took Barkley with the number 2 overall pick, whatever year he missed the whole year. Was that last year or the year before?
Last year.
Yeah, he took him with the 2 pick. He ended up winning the Super Bowl because that's his fault. But my thing, like, if I don't end up with a running back at all through 6 rounds, you got to really know your shit to be able to participate in that kind of game.
Yeah,
there's nothing worse than scrambling for running backs during the week. I'd rather look for wide receivers. I mean, I'm just being honest. Look, I'd rather have my running backs all set and then just worry about the wide receivers, because there's so many more of them to deal with and so many more I can pick up. It gets to a point in a 12-team league, like the way we keep 3 running backs, you got to have 3 guys that can play, because if you don't, it's just a pain in the ass. Like nothing's worse than trying to find that running back that you're going to try to get up on waiver wires. The wide receivers are the ones that you can make the early steal on too.
So in my 12-team league, I tend to start off after the draft with 5 or 6 running backs. Like, I'm not taking 3. I have running back. I got backs. Like, you come to me if you need one, but I'm not really trading them. I think that the wide receiver thing, the only thing about a wide receiver, though, I'm like, you get wide receivers that can literally get you 0. And if you have a running back that's playing, he's going to get you some points. You know what I mean?
There's nothing worse than like a 1-catch game. Like, you want to just choke the guy. You want to choke the guy. You really do.
1 catch for 11 yards, and you're like, thank you. I would have been better off with a 0 just for principle. So,
and I hate the fact that they say that, like, they have no concerns about fantasy football. Like, they don't care. They're not playing for fantasy football. And there's a part of me now that's like almost like, well, you should. Like a lot of like people that watch you, the reason they watch you is because of fantasy football. So if you could get that extra touchdown to I don't know who, we might like you for it, as opposed to like hating you if you're like Doug Peterson and you put in a guy with too big of gloves and you just throw a friggin' game and nobody gets any points, and it's a robbery. So I think they should play for fantasy points. How about that in that ramble?
Well, I don't know if they play for fantasy points, Kev, but contracts come down to numbers, right?
Yeah.
So yards, receptions, touchdowns. I mean, these things come to the bargaining table.
Yeah, Brady did that with Antonio Brown last year. He hit him like 9 times in that one kind of meaningless game towards the end of the season to get him his incentives. But the one thing you guys both brought up, and you have to go through this, is what are your lineups and what are your scoring rules? Like Mike was talking about corrupted. We start 3 running backs, 4 wide receivers, and it's not PPR. That would be an almost impossible league to do 0 running back. My team is probably the closest. I have 4 unbelievable wide receivers, but every week, every season, and almost every week, I'm scrambling for somebody that maybe will get 45 yards rushing and in 41 yards receiving to get me 8 points or 6 points. It's tough, but if your rules are PPR and you're doing 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, and a flex, go RB0 all the way.
Really, because that's exactly the kind of league that I'm in, and I'm always that guy that I feel like I need running backs early, maybe because I'm old. Yeah. It's like running back. Like, I don't want to deal with the bull crap. And here's the other thing about that situation. If your team is good, if you get off to a good start and a main running back goes down with an injury, you're never in the position to pick up that sexy free agent guy. Like, I feel like I'm never in the position when Elliott goes down, I'm not the guy ready, or Chubb goes down, I'm not the guy ready to go pick up Hunt, because if I'm 2-0, 3-1, and a guy gets hurt, I'm porked anyway, and that's for the guys who start off 0-3, right? So, it's a challenging thing, but I know a lot of people are going to it these days, and that's that.
It's almost not a bad thing to shit the bed week 1 and be like the worst team. Right. If you're gonna have 1 week where you're horrendous. Not I don't want to say to throw a game, but if you want to have like the lowest amount of points, it's week 1, because in that waiver wire, that 1 through I think maybe 3 or 4 is like gold when you're at the top. So there's one guy you can pick up that's going to
start a new strategy. I'm going to try and punt weeks 1 and 2, and they're going to be like, "Why didn't you put in a lineup?" I wanted to lose so I could have the 2 best free agents, and then I'm going to just unload my team like we're the freaking 96 Bulls.
See, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. But here's the thing with fantasy football: she's like a woman, fickle. At any moment, your team could just go from doing great to just junk. Everybody's hurt. No one's gonna do it. Whatever. And then some guy picks up whoever from the waiver wire. Next thing you know, he's in the bowl game. It's like fantasy football is logic to a point. Like, if you really played it for a long time, you'll agree with me. It's logic to a point, and then it's just like lady luck. It's just, here's what happens. Let's see where I am. You know what I mean? So it's tough to throw games. Right?
But I had to log into my league. Now, we play our league on Yahoo. So when you put it up on Yahoo, you go to history. It gives you the last 10 years of the people who finished 1st through 3rd or whatever. Almost like a lot of those names are consistently there. Yeah. So how much luck is there really if the same people are finishing in the top 3, 7 out of 10 years?
That's not what I guess in the corrupted, I would say, other than myself, luck's been spread around to everybody. Like it's just there's people that like there's no way they should have made runs in the playoffs. Like it just and you look at like the points they scored. Like they had their highest scoring totals like in the playoffs out of the blue, and the teams they played had their lowest scoring totals ever out of the blue. That's happened in our league more than one time, and it's just like you know what I mean?
One year I lost because Steve Berline threw for like 8 million yards in week 16. You can look it up. It was a disaster. But while we're on fantasy, I want to talk about quarterbacks, and then we're going to talk about tight ends, but I want to talk about quarterbacks. Are you of the position, and we'll start with Mike, that you need a good quarterback, or are you like one of the guys that says, I'm going to take a quarterback right before I take my defense and kicker?
If here's the thing, if you can get one of the top quarterbacks, you're going to be in the running. That's what's tough about quarterbacks with me. There's a couple of quarterbacks that if you get them, like, you know, Mahomes, somebody like that, you're going to be in the running. He's going to do Rodgers. They're going to get you points that other QBs aren't. But then after like a couple of quarterbacks, there's a dramatic drop, and then I would take them after certain players, like because they're going to get lumped together. Plus, you look to see who kept if it's keeper league, you look to see who kept the quarterback. You look to see who's a Jets fan and might go after Zach Wilson early, like little things like that. So it's really easy with quarterbacks to kind of like look and see who the keepers are, look to see where they might fall to try to figure out if your guy's going to be there. To me, that's the one position, because there's only one per team, that if I want to wait, I can kind of figure out where someone's going to fall. But I'm not going to wait if I get one of those top guys, because the teams that have those guys, sometimes those guys carry them in 1 week, you know?
Well, I'm in a league with Zach Wilson's father, and he didn't draft him, so no one should be drafting that fool. Kev, early on a quarterback, late on a quarterback?
Always late. I'm always looking for value, and I'm usually I do a ton of research to look for situations and stuff. Like it's a keeper league, and last year I picked up Aaron Rodgers late in the draft, and obviously he smoked it. This season, am I going to keep Rodgers? No, I'm going to dump him back out, because if I keep him, I'm paying his ceiling. Maybe I'll pick him up again, but I always look for late round value on quarterback, because the difference is so small between a number 1 quarterback and a number 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 quarterback. It's not worth the draft capital.
So our league is a 6-point touchdown league for quarterbacks.
Yeah.
And I still tend to be the last guy, there's 2 of us. So we kind of wait till the end. I'm thinking this year I might bump up my approach, but my problem is once you get past, like, say, Dak, Josh Allen, and Mahomes, they're all the same to me. So might as well take the last one.
Yeah,
you know,
that's what they do with like tiers. If you have tiers of guys and you realize there's only 1 or 2 left in that second tier, maybe if you want to change your approach, maybe that's when you pounce. Because what usually happens to me is I'm looking at them, then they get drafted, and I'm like, okay, now we're in the 3rd tier. So I don't care if these 4 or 5 go, as long as there's one of these left. Like I had Jameis Winston the last year he was on the Bucs, and I made it to the semifinals because he just had monster games in those end of the season weeks. Actually,
but again, there's tier 1, then there's like a tier 2, right? That's where you're hoping to snag somebody from tier 2. When you get to tier 3, you're that in a 12-team league. That guy that gets the 12th ranked quarterback, you're not happy. It's just not a happy feeling for the whole season. So that's my point about waiting for quarterbacks, because you're just not happy with that number 12 guy, 13, whoever you're going to keep fitting in. That's when you stop playing matchups.
Yeah.
Then that I don't like. Again, I'm not a big fan of that. And then secondly, the other thing I want to bring up is sometimes you get idiots in your league that will take 2 quarterbacks way before they should, or 3, just as if like they're collecting quarterbacks. And that's happened in our draft where like I'll be like, well, he won't need a quarterback, and someone will just take a quarterback because it's a good quarterback, but you're not even going to use them. And it's like, and we don't even trade in this stupid league. Like, people are afraid to trade. What are you going to do with that extra QB? But someone always does that.
Well, you know what I think that is, Kevin? I don't mean to interrupt you, but there are people that are not prepared for the draft. And the people they know happen to be quarterbacks. So when it gets to their turn in the 11th round and they don't know the names of anybody else, it's really easy to say, Blake Bortles. And it's like, okay, you just took your 3rd quarterback. I probably could have used the effing guy. And we move on. But there's definitely – it's the same guy who does that, takes a 3rd quarterback, as the guy who takes his defense in the 8th round to fill out his lineup. Like, that's the guy.
Yeah, and Coach, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's people, they don't know who to pick. Like, they don't realize there's a ton more value in other positions, and that's what they should be looking at. They should be looking at a 5th running back or a 6th wide receiver or something else, and instead they draft a 2nd quarterback. And you're like you have Mahomes. You don't need Russell Wilson or whoever maybe that's a little too high, but you know what I mean. You don't need that guy. You're never going to start him. It's very, very frustrating.
But you know what it does to a draft, though? Like, you know how you play blackjack at a table? Say there's 5, 6 guys at a table. You're all playing blackjack, and there's the guy that doesn't know how to play, and he hits when he's not supposed to hit, and he fucks up the rest of the deck for everybody else. And everybody looks at the guy, and he's just sitting there, right? He's got his free martini, and he's like, I wanted to hit on 19. And it's like, yeah, but you messed up the deck. And that's what it's like with some of the people who play fantasy who draft when they shouldn't draft.
So I would say to this, not at my table. So I got to learn blackjack from the late, great Ray Lepre Sr. There were certain rules he goes by, and these are the rules you'll go by. He's like, you always, if the dealer has a 17, you try to beat 17. If you got a 15, you try to beat 17. He played aggressive, so that's just how he always did things, right? Certain ways. You don't split certain things. You split the others. You double down on certain things. I'm not a big guy to double down on a 9. A lot of people do that. They make it work. That's not something in my repertoire. But when a guy sits down and then starts to do something like that, I'm the first guy that when he goes, hit me, I'll be like, oh, I'll just yell out loud and make it uncomfortable at that table till he realizes that we don't like him and he can't be doing stuff like that. Because they got to know. You can't just let them do that. You can't let someone sit down at the table and be like, hit me. Hey, it's like, dude, the fuck off my table and screw out of here. You're ruining the game, Kev.
So I'm going to completely disagree with both of you guys. It may shock you, but I know how to play blackjack mathematically perfectly, of course.
No way.
You hit a 9 against a 6, you hit a 9 against a 5. There's other times you hit a 9, but how do you know what the next card coming is? You don't. So if some idiot hits, he might save you all, and he takes a card that maybe now the dealer busts. It's frustrating watching him do the wrong thing.
Sorry, there's rules to this shit. You play right. It's like high-low jack. You ever play high-low jack?
Yes.
I was probably 7 years old when I learned that suckers jump on 10s. I had to be 7 years old. I see people, I play cards. One time some kid got hit in the head in my bottle at my Nonna's house because he threw a 3 of the freaking clubs on a 10 of diamonds just to get the game points, and then a brawl broke out in my Nonna's house because suckers jump on 10s, and it's like fantasy football when suckers jump on backup quarterbacks. Stop doing it.
Kev, and here's why you're wrong. Because you're letting some jackass sit down and dictate the rest of your night. You understand what I'm saying with a guy like that?
It
does bother me. It does. I'm sitting here, and he sits down, and he's going to change the deck. He's going to run this. No.
How do you know he didn't change the deck to benefit you? You don't. That's the whole argument.
Kev, if you're going to have that argument with me, how do I know I'm not going to walk down the stairs, trip, fall, break my neck, walk outside, get hit by a car?
It's not the same thing at all.
It might not be the same, but here's the thing. I don't know if he's not going to benefit me, and maybe he will, maybe he won't, but you got to play your hand right. Like, there's rules to the freaking game.
And I get that.
Hit on your 20. Do not hit on your 20 unless you want me to meet you at your car later.
Okay. What if the dealer's showing a 16 and that guy went last, hits on his 20, takes a 5? That would have been the dealer 21. Everyone at the table would have lost. Now the dealer hits their 16, gets a 7 and busts. You should be thanking that guy for
he played right. He played right.
That'd be like a Disney moment. That'd be like a magical once in a moment type of that guy sitting at the table hitting incorrectly is the guy that comes to pick up basketball and basket hangs, who just stays near half court, wait for someone taller to get the rebound and just starts sprinting and running.
And he goes,
and I got to throw a baseball pass to him.
He goes home and tells his wife, I had 18 against college players. Yeah, okay, buddy, you sure did. Here's one thing that does suck about the quarterback thing is when you end up having to play the matchups, because just like cards, you're never going to get it right if you start guessing. Like, there's been years I've been in here. I remember who's the guy? David Garrod used to play for Jacksonville.
Yeah.
One year I had him and Roethlisberger the same year. I'm telling you, out of 16 weeks of fantasy football, I picked the wrong one 16 times in a row of who's going to have more points. And there is something to that mental challenge on a Sunday morning about what quarterback am I going to play that the kid who got Drew Brees didn't have to deal with for 8 years. So speak on that a little bit.
No, it's totally true. You're right. You have to have the stomach for it. And the other thing is, if they're so close and like it bothers you that much, then just dump Gerard and go with Roethlisberger every single week and live with it. Because some people don't like doing that analysis. I love it. I absolutely love it, and I don't look back and say I should have done this or I should have done that. I love trying to figure out the matchup. But if you don't want to do it, if you don't want to waste time on it, I get it. Like I do the same thing with tight ends. I do the same thing with kickers. I do the same thing with defense. I'm willing to stress myself on 4 or 5 positions every single week because I think I'd rather have the other parts so strong in the draft.
Brother Ray gives great fantasy advice, and his fantasy advice is to start your studs.
Yeah.
He says that every week I've ever asked him advice, he'll just say the same thing. Just start the studs. Don't worry about matchups. Like don't just play your best.
Yeah,
player.
but we're talking about when you don't have a stud.
Yeah. So going back to my point, when you're that 13th to 12th team and you don't have a quarterback that's decent, I can't live like that. I couldn't go through a fantasy season like that. I'd have to trade for some sort of quarterback that I have some belief in. Really, I can't. That's the one position, man. I don't want to be without a viable starter. I don't see it. I don't see many teams go all the way. Like Kev, you had Peyton Manning for years, and he did wonders for your team.
Yeah, I never won a championship with him. I ended up winning with Matt Ryan, who was on a down year, and I drafted him very, very late in the draft because he was valuable. I'm not saying having Manning was bad. That was awesome. I knew I had guaranteed points every single week. I knew it, but he was also taking a keeper spot. He was, in that's very valuable also.
Well, here's one thing about positions that's new this year that I don't remember. Even during the Tony Gonzalez days, I don't remember this, but Travis Kelce is a first-round pick.
Yeah.
And if you want him, you're getting him in the top 10 in the first round, if not the first couple of picks of the second round. My question to you guys, we'll start with Mike. Have you ever taken a tight end in the first 2 rounds? And if you did, what would your second round pick be?
No. All right. So obviously I draft old school. Like I'm just an old school person in that sense. And I just can't, I'm not taking a tight end. I'm just not taking a tight end early. You know what I mean? I'm just not doing it. Like that's another position where you can have your Kelce's, you can have a couple of these guys or whatever, but there's a lot of young guys coming up. That's one position where there's always like 1 or 2 young guys that are going to merge this year and have like a really good, like maybe 6 or 7 touchdown season. So I would never do it. I never have. Kelce could be sitting right there and I would find the next available wide receiver. Like that's just what I would do. I would skip over him even if he was available because I just don't want to ever tie my wagon to a tight end in the first 2 rounds. I don't. It's wide receiver, running back, or a split of those 2. Other than that, every year I'm the same. It's always those 2 positions.
Not even looking. Kev, you looking?
See, I've done it a couple times, and I'll probably never do it again because I did it with Gronk and he got hurt. I did it with Kittle and he got hurt, and like. I'm not going to say like, okay, that's a very small sample size, obviously. But when I'm talking about RB0, go with wide receivers over running backs because they get hurt less frequently. Tight ends take a friggin' beating. So you draft Kelce with your number 1 pick at 9th, and he's going across the middle, something short. Some linebacker puts him to sleep. Then what happens? You're effed. So I will, and so I'll probably stay away. Plus, I disagree with most fantasy analysts. A lot of them talk about tight ends being an ugly position and it's a mess. And after the top 3, it's a waste of time. I completely disagree. I think if you know football, you can find an offense where a tight end is going to be relevant. Like last year, I drafted T.J. Hawkinson, huge pickup. The year before, I drafted Waller on Oakland, huge pickup. Like if you know football and you can figure out an offense, there's always, like King Mike said, a tight end at the edge of the rankings that has a potential to really move up. Like a good one this year, which is hilarious, is the guy in Atlanta, not Kyle Pitts, the other guy, Hayden Hurst, because Pitts is going to be a wide receiver. Hurst is going to be an inline tight end, and he's going to get used as a tight end. So if you are looking for a tight end very, very late, look at Hurst because he's a guy that's on the edge. He's got a ton of talent, and everyone's looking at Pitts and forgetting about him. So that's how I approach it.
So I always feel like this. If I were to do it, you almost have to go all in and be like, I'm going to draft this. I'm going to take this year and like just do everything the opposite I've ever done. Like if I take Kelsey in the first round, I almost have to take a quarterback in the second round and just do the opposite of everything I've ever done. Because just like you, Mike, I'm not even looking at Kelsey. He could be sitting there in the second round, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not taking a tight end here. But I feel like 1 year in my life, I'd like to be like, you know what? I'm just going to fucking try this. I'm going to go tight end, quarterback, and then we'll start worrying about the rest. Whereas usually that's like the opposite approach.
So that's like the Joker. That's like the Joker drafting a football team.
Yeah, you don't. But once you can you really go like tight end, running back? Okay, now I'm going to be starting receivers in the 4th round. Who the hell am I getting? Is Santana Moss coming out of retirement? Like, what am I doing?
Well, you got to go tight end, wide receiver, and then come back to running back late because you're going to the 3rd round running back as your RB1 is a waste of time anyway.
So you might as well go 6th round running back as your RB1.
Yeah, because it's a mess. But like if Kelsey was there in the 2nd round and you're picking 7th in your draft,
yeah.
So 7 comes to you. It goes to 12, and then it's 5 back. So you're at 17. If Kelsey's there at 17, you have to take him.
Yeah, I probably won't. And here's the thing.
You'd be saying not to.
I don't think Kelsey's going to even finish as the number 1 ranked tight end. Like, that's the other thing. I think Kittle's going to have a month. I think Kittle's the number 1 tight end in football right now. Like, Kelsey's – you talked about the miles on Derrick Henry in the first show. Kelsey's taking a lot of freaking hits, man. So, to me – I'm going to go running back in the 1st round. That's inevitable. And then I'm probably going to go running back in the 2nd round, but that's where you get where that line is. But really, Kelsey, it was interesting to me how you build your team if you start with a tight end.
Well, let me give you an example of a tight end that like aggravates me every year, and that's Evan Ingram. So Evan Ingram, I've had him for I don't know how many years. I always can pick him up in the draft. No one touches him. The kid runs like a 4.3. I mean, he flies. But he can't catch, which is the first part of it. You got to catch it, and then you can run. And every year he flashes brilliance. Like he can just catch a ball and go to the house. And he's that kind of guy that every year you think, if he just catches the balls that he's been dropping, like these certain catches, he's physically dominant. He really is out there when you watch him. But he made the Pro Bowl team last year, and every Giants fan, I swear to you, we all went, huh? Like, how did he make the team? He can't catch. He keeps dropping the ball. We're watching the games, but he's a Pro Bowler? Made no sense. But he has Pro Bowl ability. So I get stuck on guys like him.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, you tend to do that, like big, like physical, like freak tight ends. Yeah. So okay, TJ. So here's your draft. Is your league PPR or no?
Yeah.
Okay, so McCaffrey goes 1st, Kamara goes 2nd, Cook goes 3rd, Henry goes 4th, Zeke goes 5th, Aaron Jones goes 6th. 7th, you're going to take Eckler, Kelsey, Diggs, Jonathan Taylor. Like, you're in a dead zone right there. Eckler is the only running back worthy of that pick.
I'm going to either take Barkley or Taylor right there.
Over Diggs.
Yeah. Because I don't want to end up on the backside with like Tariq Cohen as my 2nd running back or one of these guys from the AFC East we talked about earlier. You know, like I want 2 running backs that are going to get me double-digit points every week so I can have a shot. But I hear what you're saying because the other option is to go with Diggs or Adams and then on the backside on the way back, pick up whichever one's left. Because whoever's going to take a running back in the 1st round, at the back end of the 1st round, they're all going to take one in the back end of the 2nd round because then no one's going to want to go 20 picks without a running back.
Oh, when are you doing this draft?
Next Friday night. Why, you want to come?
I might want to. Oh, it's in person or it's online?
No, we do in person.
All right, we got to talk about this. I may want to be your advisor.
You can come, listen. We could do it. We could do it right on the podcast.
Because you could crush. You may be able to crush this draft. Because if the teams in front of you go running back, and you go wide receiver, or wide receiver, tight end, you're going to demolish those teams.
That's good because then in the 2nd round, when I'm going for my RB2, you can tell me the names of the people who are left because I'm not going to know who they are. Because I'm going to be like, oh, this guy is the 3rd string running back on the Texans, and he's my freaking starter right now. I don't know who he is. Mike, shake his head no. Mike, do it my way, right?
The more you talk about it, the more I think you got to get a running back. Like I feel so much better with my running back solidified. Like lock them down. I do. I would go running back.
It is because in this league, so we got 2 running backs, 3 receivers, and a flex. So I can put a running back at flex too. So if I end up with a David Montgomery type flex, I'm happy with that. But guys, I want to switch it up because we're going to do fantasy football probably next Thursday. Since my draft is Friday, you guys are going to help me with my draft prep. I want to talk about the NBA. You guys want to talk about the NBA a little bit?
Sure.
All right. I got some rules. We're going to talk about the NBA in the 90s, and you're not allowed to say his name one time.
LeBron? Right. Sorry. No.
LeBron was born in the 90s, Kev, because we're old people. So I want to live in a world where he wasn't there. They won 6 rings. They beat the Lakers, the Blazers, the Suns, the Jazz twice, and the Sonics. If not for the Bulls of the 90s, who is the team of the 90s?
Wow.
It could have been the Pacers, could have been the Lakers, Rockets, or Pacers, Lakers, Rockets, Detroit.
Mike, the Lakers made one finals in the 90s. It was 91, and Magic was old.
In the whole 90s?
In the whole 90s, they made one finals.
Well, see, now see that's why we're old, because I blank on that. But my thoughts are, like, I know the Sonics team was a good enough team to have won a championship. I know that, like, Detroit was really good, and they, because of him, the guy we won't speak his name, he messed with them a lot. He messed with the Celtics a lot. So, and the Pacers was a team to me that before the Malice in the Palace, which is fantastic, by the way, on Netflix.
I gotta watch it. I didn't watch it yet.
Oh my God, the Pacers were set up to be one of the better teams that year. That was the year for them to win it, and Reggie would have had his swan song, but didn't work out that way. So I don't know. All those teams I just mentioned all could have been better. It's weird to take him out is to deconstruct the whole league.
It's weird to do it, but I want to try it this way, Kev. If the Bulls of the 90s weren't there, does Shaq stay in Orlando and win multiple rings, or does Shaq still go to LA and the Pacers are the team of the East, or is it the Knicks?
I'm looking at it now. Okay, so the Pistons look like their last championship was 89-90, and then it was Bulls. Could the Pistons have hung on longer without the Bulls? Is that like, or were they spent anyway and like they were done?
No, the Bulls had to work to beat them in 92 or 91. That's the one where they didn't shake hands when they walked off the court.
Okay, so they were kind of on their way out.
But they would have won. So they would have been in there against the Lakers in 91. I think everyone expected it to be the Pistons in 91.
And then what about the Rockets? Because they had those 2 years when the man we won't name was away, and they got their 2 championships. Could they, without him, would they have had a 4-year run instead of a 2-year run?
I think it was tougher in the West. I honestly think that those teams in the West would have won a lot of championships. It's just that, like, they ran into him. The Sonics had it that one year. I thought, like, you went back, you said some names, and I'm like, I think they had it that year. They could have won it. The East wasn't as good as I thought they were as the 90s went on. You know what I mean? In my opinion, like when he won the second 3 at least, I thought it was more the West. But
so here's what prompted this conversation, because I know I pulled it right out of the blue. I was having this discussion about life without the Bulls, right? Suppose they didn't happen. And every team that kept coming up to say that would have dominated the NBA without them were Western Conference teams. It was, well, the Jazz would have won 2. The Sonics would have won. But what the Bulls did on the East has nothing to do with the fact that, like, 6 different teams went to the finals on the West. So to me, if there was going to be another dynasty in the 90s that wasn't the Bulls, it would either have to be Reggie, Ewing, or O'Neal. Because the West had nothing to do with what the Bulls were doing. Does that make sense, Kevin?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. What you're saying, yeah, that's actually a really good way to look at it. Like, yeah, because it wasn't like they played the same team, several years in a row like we had with Cleveland and Golden State. Because you see, the West would have played out the same way in our argument. Well, maybe not once you factor in player movement, but that's a really good way to look at it. So you're saying basically without the Bulls there from the East, would anyone have been as dominant? Because on the West, there wasn't a team that made it like 6 times.
Lakers, Phoenix, the Rockets, the Sonics, the Jazz, and the Spurs. That's 7 teams out of 10 years in the 90s. So if there was going to be a dynasty in the 90s, how can we say it's from the West when they couldn't even figure themselves out? To me, I think it would have been in the East. Mike, you think it's the Knicks, the Magic, or am I full of shit?
So the guy we won't speak of, he never played in a Game 7 in any series ever. He never had to go to a Game 7. So that's dominance. Trust me, it really is. I think it would have been a parity. I think they would have been I don't think those East teams would have been good enough to beat the West teams. Like, no matter, like, when I match them up and I think about the Knicks and how they played, Ewing came up short. Starks I didn't buy as a great scorer. Like, I can knock them all down. Even the Pacers, like, you could bring it all down. And O'Neal is like, he wanted to go to L.A. I don't think anything else had anything to do with other than that. He just wanted to go to L.A., so he was out. I can't think of an East team that would have hung in there and been dominant. Like, I just don't think there was one left in the East. I think it all kind of power switched.
So you think without the Bulls, there would have just been a revolving door in both conferences?
Yep.
And it would have been like who we get and who we get and who we get, and unlike the NBA before that or since that.
It would have been different. It would have probably been because, again, to take out the greatest player, you know what I mean? The fact that he won 6.
Era, for sure, yeah. It's hard.
The whole era changes. So I think that you get a lot of, like, West Coast teams winning one. Maybe the East Coast pulls off one. They go back and forth. But I don't see one dominant team anymore. Like, it just becomes more parity. There's like 4 or 5 teams that I can see battling out.
But, Kev, isn't that different than the NBA as we know it from the beginning of the NBA?
Well, that's what I was just going to say. The way you phrase that is very interesting. So we're trying to go through and say, okay, in the 90s, it would have been Houston gets 2, maybe Detroit gets 2, San Antonio gets 1, Seattle gets 1, Phoenix gets 1 or 2, LA gets 1. That's not the way. Yeah, it's weird because it's not the way the NBA seems to work.
There were no super teams. They were all really good teams at that time, right? It wasn't super teams. It wasn't like the big 3. It wasn't that junk. It was a bunch of teams that were really good, had different systems, different styles. So every year there was like one team that it was like their year up. Like the year the Sonics were good, it was just like it was their turn. There were just teams that stepped up and it was like their turn to be dominant. The Rockets did it. It's just how it goes. You take him out of there, I think all these teams have a shot at getting like maybe 1 or 2 tops, but that's about it.
You know what I think would have happened? You guys want my 5-cent opinion?
Yeah.
I think it would have been known as the greatest era of big men in the history of basketball.
Huh.
I think you would have had Shaq get rings. You would have had Ewing get rings. Olajuwon already got his 2. I think you might have seen a David Robinson ring. I think the big men would have came to the forefront during that era because all the best players, if you ever go to a list, and I just pulled up an NBA.com list of best players in the 90s, it's Akeem, it's Malone, it's Robinson, it's freaking Shaq, it's Barkley. They're all big. It's Ewing, and it's freaking Sean Kemp. Like, to me, we had the best era of big men in the history of the NBA, and we didn't get to see it because the 90s Bulls won all the titles. Anyone agree or disagree with that?
Well, here's what I want to say about that. So he's not there. Big men run the game. They run the courts. Okay, that changes kids watching basketball. That changes all the kids being influenced by what they're seeing. So now you don't get anybody influenced by him. That changes everything. You're gonna get more.
Weird, huh?
I don't think we would evolve as quickly to the 3s, the 3 and D guys, if we didn't promote offense. He just brought offense, creativity, like dominant scoring, going out there, kids practicing, doing these, going under, flipping it around, all that stuff. And that's sparked the way the NBA is now. You take him out of that, yeah, you get those big guys or whatever, and maybe the NBA doesn't develop as fast as it does right now. Maybe it's not so like Euro and like fast and quick. Maybe it's not. Maybe it changes the whole thing.
That's a really awesome point because it probably puts us back at least 10 years, maybe more, because it would probably have bled into the 2000s. Yep. And it would have still been you need a big guy you need at least like 2 big guys to win. Versus with Jordan, you had 3 guys playing center every season for them. You had Rodman as a power forward who didn't score at all. They were like just complementary. You had 2 positions that were just completely complementary around your like alpha guards scorer. Wow.
You know what's crazy to think about? Before Jordan, the wing player wasn't really a sexy position. Like, you were a point guard or a wing, like or a big man. If you look in the 90s and you take him out, you're looking at Drexler, Reggie, and Pippen. Like, I don't see kids going home to try and be Clyde Drexler or Scottie Pippen. So he made playing the wing. Now it's the most important position in the game. All the great players want to be the wing. Even the freaking big guys want to be wings. But in the 80s and the 90s outside of him, the wing was almost like you're a good athlete, but you're not a great player.
All right, so if he's no longer there, does Iverson still come into the league like he comes into the league? And if he does that make Iverson jump really high because he would have came in and like been like nobody anyone ever seen? Like he would have been the first shooting guard that was like
Iverson. I think you get Iverson because I think Isaiah Thomas existed in the 80s. And there was always going to be a spot for somebody who was that scat back that was lightning quick. Or else Iverson ends up in the NFL. But I don't know what happens with like Kobe. Like he's always going to be a freak and he's always going to be a worker. Would he be, I don't want to say it like this. If there was no Jordan, Kobe would just be Kobe and there would be no Jordan to compare him to. He might just be that.
What blueprint would he go off? Exactly. Let me just flip this to music real quick. When you're doing something, say you're playing the guitar and you can't figure out a riff. It's like one of those things. It's like it's in your head. You just can't figure it out. Someone shows it to you. You've now seen it. You now can do it. I don't know. It's just weird, but it's just true. So it's like when you're watching basketball, sometimes if he didn't do all the stuff that he did, people wouldn't have saw it and said, oh, I can do that. I can try that. I can do this. There's so many moves and stuff that he did that it's like I didn't know I could do that. Like the biggest thing I always look back on when I played basketball as a kid was we were just so physical and so much like old school center, run, this, that. And my son will come up the court. It goes through his legs 2 or 3 times. And it's just so I'm always like, I never did that because I didn't know how to. No one showed me. And I didn't know I could do it. I had, one NBA game a week if I was lucky on a Sunday, right? And then I would have to go outside on a rim that was 10.5 feet high because my dad put it up wrong. And I had no one to show me anything. So I would stand in the yard and just shoot and practice moves that I saw in the one single game I saw the Lakers and Celtics. I would replicate what Worthy did and how he would finish over and over and over. That's all I had. You know what I mean? Because I didn't know I could do that. I know that sounds dumb, but
in other words, Kobe would never know. Kobe would never know you can catch on the elbow as a wing and go like Olajuwon move post moves and take a fall away from 19 feet.
Yeah, the fall away would be there. He wouldn't have that in his arsenal like he did.
You know, amazing that would be to see. Like we saw Jordan do it, but it was weird. Like Jordan just all of a sudden became Jordan, and it was like amazing everything he did. But can you imagine seeing someone that was like almost as good trying those moves? You'd be like, what is this guy doing? This guy's like a net negative. Why is he taking catching a ball in the elbow, dribbling, doing a fall-away jumper? It's a wasted shot. Bird would never take that shot. You should never do that.
Let me put it this way.
Growing up. So I grew up, I was born in 79. So I pretty much, when I was playing youth sports, like all-star teams and shit, it was not cool to be like Mike. Like he was selfish and you know, I wasn't strong enough, but we would try and go under the basket and we would try and do shit that Jordan did and coaches would ream us out. Even if you tried to play like Magic, you know, you had to try and be like Bird. Like you had to be like Danny Ainge. Like coaches hated Jordan. Hated him.
Well, all right. So it depends on the coach too, because I had a couple of coaches and we had the great Ernie D as a coach who would love a behind the back pass. Like I would be practicing and I would throw a behind the back pass to him. And he thought that was the greatest thing since sliced bread. So some coaches were just strange like that. But let me get back to this. I do agree with you because that's how they wanted us to play. They wanted the closer to the basket you could get, the better was always what was drilled in my head about scoring, right? Now, but what if there's no Jordan? And remember how people started to try to like duplicate Shaq for a while? They're like, we got to get the next Shaq, which was like a bad idea because once again, that's an athlete that you can't duplicate. So there's a lot of like big country guys that got drafted or guys like that they They were drafted because they were big and strong really early, but they didn't translate well into the NBA. You know what I mean? So Shaq actually was a bad influence, I thought, for a while, because people went out and tried to get the biggest center they could. No one moves like he does. He's just too strong. You're just not going to duplicate.
So let me ask you guys this.
Can't duplicate.
If it wasn't for him, and we had an era that was about Olajuwon, Ewing, Robinson, do you think we're still watching basketball right now where it's all about the bigs? Or do you think it would have changed naturally anyway, Kev?
I think it would have changed naturally anyway, because eventually it was an analytics revolution is what powered it all. Like they did, like what Bill James did for baseball first. Like I was reading, again, you guys are not going to be surprised. I was reading the Bill James Almanac in the 80s when it first came out about breaking down baseball stats to like next level numbers and all that stuff. Then there was Moneyball with the A's. And then naturally other people said, how do we apply this to our sport? And Houston was one of the first and best ones to do in the NBA. I think it would have happened anyway. It might have even been more jarring. Might have even made it worse, because it would have gone from Ewing, Shaq, Olajuwon, David Robinson to that. It would be like a very jarring gear shift. But with at least the introduction of the wings, you kind of could see it coming. But I think it would have happened anyway. I don't think there's any way to stop analytics in any sport. There's no way.
You want some honest truth? Without him, I don't think we'd even recognize the NBA today. I don't think it would have anywhere near the popularity. It wouldn't have anywhere near the amount of money they can pay players. The dude brought it to a whole other level. He brought it to where it was the sport to watch. He changed the way people dressed. Sneakers became through the roof. There's so much that he just changed. Dude, it would be a completely different NBA, and I don't think people would watch it as much.
And I think that's my question, Kev, because you weren't kind of cool if you took jump shots in the 80s, and you really weren't cool if you took jump shots in the 90s. So the analytics only work if the shooting percentages go along with it. Like, the analytics don't work if you're shooting Clyde Drexler's freaking jump shot percentage. And if he was the best wing we had in the 90s, what makes anyone think we're going to come up to Klay Thompson in 20 years? I don't know if we are.
That's a really, really good way to put it. Yeah. It would be, you're right. It would be very hard to fit the players into the model. Yeah. Because if you're, and I'm thinking about guys that can't create, because the whole one thing you need on the, like the teams now is you need somebody that can create pretty much by themselves. If you don't have one or two of those, your team is screwed no matter how good they are with any other piece of the analytics. And with like the stuff in the 90s, you didn't necessarily need someone that could entirely create on their own. It was good if you had it, but you could play team basketball and work around, and all of a sudden you got McHale.
Hard play in the 90s, you got Doc Rivers and Sam Cassell and the job of the and what's Avery Johnson, the job of the guard was to pretty much give it to the big.
Yeah.
And you would determine to be a good point guard if you knew how to give the ball to the big. Where now, no one gives a shit if you can make an entry pass. I don't care.
And like announcers and everyone else would complain, he's not giving it to him where he wants it.
Yeah.
Because you have these guys that were like low post technicians, and if they're 2 steps up or 2 steps out, it's not going to work. Then they have to pass it back out, and you have to swing it around and come back again and hope there's still time on the shot clock. Yeah. The point guard position entirely changed.
So that was the conversation I wanted to have real quick, because I know time is a ticking away. Time goes by fast in this Bar Fongool, I got to tell you. Offensive line play. We're going to go one take by each guy. You hear a lot about offensive line play. I feel like offensive linemen like to talk about offensive line play. I feel like you can't win a Super Bowl unless you have an offensive line that actually exists. But are they important? Because if you look at the outside of the Cowboys, when you look at Super Bowl champions in the last, say, 10, 15 years, I don't know that offensive line play matters as much as they try and tell you on TV. Mike, do you agree or disagree with that?
The offensive line is so fucking important, it's ridiculous. And this is coming from a guy who's a fan of the New York Football Giants, and we haven't been able to get an offensive line correct in 10 years. So I've had to watch Eli Manning get the second half of his career just destroyed, and I get to watch a guy like Daniel Jones get unfairly judged because we can't block. when you can't block, and when you're a fan of a team and you sit down to watch the game, and the way that your team gets beat is the fact that you can't block. You just can't block. You can't get a hole for a running back. You can't get the quarterback to even get the 3 Mississippi, right? It's horrendous. The offensive line is so important. It's huge. To me, it starts and ends with the lines. How strong you are on both lines, defensive line and offensive line. I think that's the most important things. Building the trenches.
Yeah, completely agree. I think you saw it in the Super Bowl with the Chiefs. Their offensive line was in shambles, fell apart. Now, what I don't think you need to have like the Cowboys' offensive line from the mid '90s. I don't think you need exactly that, but you need an offensive line that can run block, like to be aggressive, because and can pass block. Because pass blocking is passive; they're going backwards. You can't have a team that can only pass block. You have to be able to do both. You have to be able to set the tone, because you can't get anything else done if you can't control line of scrimmage at least for a couple of seconds. So I think it's entirely accurate to say that you need a very good offensive line, but I don't think you need to spend 40% of your salary cap on it. I think you can work with guys, you can figure out who's good at what, and put together a decent offensive line for a reasonable deal.
So here's my thing: if the offensive line is so important, if you had the best offensive line, you would always be in the playoffs, and I don't feel like that's the case. I feel like here's what I think is the most important thing about the offensive line: 5 healthy grown men. I feel like the best offensive lines in football are the ones that have continuity, because I feel like it's more of a dance than it is putting the 5 best guys out there. I feel like the offensive lines, when they stay healthy, even once – so the Bears suck, right? They've always sucked. The last couple times the Bears made the playoffs, it's because the offensive line was healthy. It wasn't because they had different guys. It was just because we had the same 5 guys for 14 games, and we went 9-7. So to me, you hear all this. If it was really true, Kev, you're an analytics guy. If it was the most important thing, then they would get paid to do it. Yeah. It's how I feel about it.
Well, and that's why I said it doesn't have to be like 40% of your salary cap, but if you don't have it, you are automatically going to fail. Like a team with a bad offensive line can never succeed. So you absolutely need a certain baseline. And if you want to really succeed, continuity is a hugely important thing. You could get an offensive line of guys that grade, if all 5 of them grade 70 out of 100, but they play 17 games together, they're going to be amazing. Versus a line with a couple of 90s and a couple of 60s who have guys in and out of the lineup all the time. Continuity is hugely important because you have to be able to communicate without talking, all these different things. Completely agree. And teams have to put more focus into it, because you can see a bad offensive line destroys seasons. A great offensive line is not going to get you to the Super Bowl. And I'd be teams that can put together just an offensive line are such an exception, because it takes so much thinking and so much finding the right people and the right cap allocation and all that. If you can somehow luck into an offensive line year after year.
Mike, how do I know the offensive line's good, or if the running back's just the one making them look good?
All right, you'll see the holes. I mean, you really, if you play Madden, even the kids that play Madden, they can see holes break up, and they can see where the running back should go. But look, it's not even having 5 guys anymore. It's having like 8 or 9 bodies that are healthy, that can rotate, because they don't do that 5 all the time now. You got to have at least like somebody who can come in and rotate at different positions. You got to have that guy who can play center and guard. You got to have that swing tackle. If you don't have all this stuff, your offensive line ends up like the freaking Giants. And if you can't block, you can't run. If you can't block, you can't pass. The Giants have had the same guys the last couple of years, right? Same guys.
This conversation is so bad because Mike's a Giants fan and I'm a Bears fan, so we're talking from a position of fucking total anguish.
And I'm trying
what bothers me is that you also don't like the fact that they should play all the snaps in preseason. Guys don't have to play. Practice is a joke. All this other crap. That offensive line should practice every day, and then twice on Sundays, and then at night. They should be walking around together everywhere they go. It's a group of 5 pushing people. It's like the Giants put in like a rookie last year, and you could see him stepping back and not knowing where he's supposed to be stepping. He's stepping on the right tackle's foot. It's a joke.
I'll tell you this.
8 quality offensive linemen, or you're not going to win in the NFL. You might not win the championship. You ain't going to win.
A bad offensive lineman can ruin your entire season because it can definitely ruin a third down, and he'll definitely blow you games, right? So we'll take the bad ones because the bad ones stand out. Like the Bears had a guy, dude Webb. He was like a fucking turnstile, and if he happened to block the guy, there was a flag coming. So I'm not going to worry about that.
But they ruin quarterbacks and they ruin running backs.
They do.
A bad offensive line can ruin both.
And when you have a bad offensive line and it's 3rd and 8 and you know your quarterback's about to have like 1 second to get rid of the ball because you've been watching the team and you're like, this guy's got no shot. He's going to get killed right now. But here's my thing. When you take away the bad offensive lines, now whenever they're ranking offensive lines, I feel like they're just looking at the damn standings and they're going to tell me those are the good offensive lines. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you got to look at it now. Well, you got to look at it before the season starts. Like Cleveland right now is projected to have a very good offensive line. New England's projected to have a good offensive line. I'd have to look. I can look and give a couple others, but like Cleveland last season, one of the biggest changes for them was improved offensive line play, and they're supposed to be at least holding the line and slightly improved.
Tell me this won't happen though, Kev. Tell me this won't happen. If Cleveland finishes 8-8 next year, those same 5 guys will be ranked in the middle of the pack on offensive line, no matter what else happens.
I don't necessarily agree with that because you can look at there's stats where you can see it. Like you asked Mike, how do you know if it's an offensive lineman or a running back? There's yards before contact. Let's say your offensive line is like blowing open holes, and King Michael's going 2 yards before contact, but only averages 3.5 yards a carry. That means as soon as he hits, he falls forward, he's down, he's done. You can like this is like analytics applied to football. You could do the same thing on pass blocking, and they even have it advanced enough now where you have a quarterback like Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers who runs around a lot and takes a sack, and like somehow they have to attribute the sack to the right tackle or left tackle. It's really not his fault because Wilson held onto the ball way too long and did scrambling. So you can see all that stuff. So if you really like look at sites like Pro Football Focus or well, just start there. I mean, they're really good at offensive line ranks, but there's others that do it too. I think you can tell, and I think they do it. They do it before the season starts.
There's also though the most overrated running back in my lifetime was Emmitt Smith.
No.
Well, he was, and I'm going to tell you why.
Closing the bar.
Because he had the greatest offensive line in front of him for a couple of years, where if you watch the holes that he had, I mean, I'm not saying he was horrible. I'm saying that a lot of those games, those yards, dude, other running backs could have easily did what he was doing. Emmitt wasn't like blazing through places and knocking guys
yards,
down.
Most touchdowns, most rings, best running back ever.
How many Pro Bowl linemen did they have? How many Pro Bowl offensive linemen did they have during his run?
I'll tell you what, if you
at
took
every
that
position
offensive line and put them on the Bears, so for them to run behind freaking name your Bears running back in the 90s.
When you make 3 Pro Bowlers every year, I mean, come on, that offensive line was.
And
if you can't agree that offensive line was one of the best, if not one of the best.
An offensive
ever.
line can make a running back look real freaking good, and a running back can make an offensive line look real freaking good.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing with the advanced stats. But look, King, I'm going to agree with you and disagree with you that those Dallas offensive lines were unbelievably strong. However, Emmitt Smith was a great running back. He was
not the greatest though, not in the top.
Not the greatest of all time. Like but if you needed one big game, you know Emmitt Smith's not going to get you negative carries. You know he's not going to fumble. You know he's always going to fall forward. You know he's going to come through. He's not going to get you an 87-yard run. But if he'll hit you 12 yards, 8 yards, 6 yards, 4 yards, 8 yards, 9 yards, over and over and over, like
he had so many untouched runs though. That line, dude, I had to watch that line. Let me tell you something.
Unbelievable.
They were unbelievable. Larry Allen, guys like that would just destroy whoever was in front of them. So I mean, he's the leading rusher right now still of all time, right?
All time,
yeah.
So there's a reason. Like there is a reason that line helped get him there. Like Barry Sanders pretty much was like, you know what, I'm not coming back. I'm not coming back.
I hate that friggin' argument.
But it's true though, he didn't want to come back.
He's got the most yards of all time is because he ran for the most yards of all time.
Yeah, but
Barry Sanders is a walking choke job. The guy never played good in a big game his entire life. All his little joystick runs came against friggin' garbage. And every time he had a game, when it was a big play, he ran for negative yards because he was too busy dancing trying to make 8 yards when he could have made 3. Don't give me that.
And that's why you got to worry about Barkley. That's the exact thing you have to worry about with Barkley.
No, I actually worry more about Barkley than I do sometimes about like when I watch Barry. I think Barry gets a bad knock for all those lost yards. I mean, a lot of times when he got the ball, there were like 2 or 3 guys in the backfield with him on the defense.
Oh,
like
that's
you watch all his. Go back and watch his clips. Go back and walk. You know what? Listen.
You're only
there's a
watching the
reason
clips
why
you
he's
wanna watch.
dancing around. Wait, there's a reason why he's dancing around. Because there's
Yeah,
no
he's greedy.
fucking holes. You dance around because you're like, should I go here? No. Should I go here? No. Is there someone there? No. And then he's running and he's spinning and he's still running and no one's blocking. All
I
this,
played
that's all
with
it is.
guys
It looks
like
like
him.
he's a
You know what
jailbreak.
we called them selfish running backs. And
Barry
coaches
was
would
not
say,
selfish.
Don't be selfish. Go
There's
forward.
nothing selfish about Barry Sanders at all.
He retired
At
in the middle of his prime.
Hey.
That's the most selfish thing you can do,
That's
Simone.
not selfish quitting at that point. Why is that selfish? His body, just like Calvin Johnson quit early with the Lions. You're getting your ass handed to you. You're doing all this stuff. What are they doing to add to your team? They go and sign that guy from that played one time with the Dolphins that barely looked good, and they sign him. Oh, he's a big quarterback now. What was his name?
Urban Moore was nice.
No, but they stunk. They always stunk. They never put anybody around him. They never gave him a line. He get his ass handed to him. He does these runs, and people are like, well, he gets negative runs. And I'm like, well, you would too, that there's 4 guys running at you in the backfield. That was a horrible example.
He's the most overrated friggin' player besides Bo Jackson ever.
You know why that offensive line couldn't blow holes open? It's because Coach TJ was the offensive line coach at that time. They never practiced.
You didn't
They
practice.
didn't play any preseason games together.
They didn't even know each other. No continuity.
Tried to run
Never
plays.
met. I used to let them only hang out on Sundays at 1 o'clock and Thanksgiving every other year.
If
Guys,
Barry played on the Cowboys during that run,
no
you're
way.
telling me he
Barry
wouldn't
played
have-
on the Cowboys. No rings. 0 rings.
It's not going that far.
Yeah, gentlemen.
he's a better running back than Emmitt Smith.
It's been
He is
so
a
much
better
fun.
running back.
This is the most fun I
Right?
had in weeks.
Kev, you'd agree to that as a Cowboys fan, right?
We didn't even hit the defensive line. I was already on that. No, King, I don't. I think Emmitt Smith was
Better than-
a better running back overall.
Yeah, he went straight. He went forward. You know why? Because in football, on the gridiron, the job is to gain yards.
I have one question. Are you guys high?
No.
You guys aren't like on illegal substances right now? Kev, you weren't smoking crack or anything like that before these comments? Really?
Not that kind of
Emmitt Smith is better than Barry Sanders, really?
Yes.
Emmitt Smith is better than Barry Sanders, really?
All-time leading rusher.
I have more
with
numbers.
that line. Hey.
Oh, please.
He looked great in a Cardinals uniform, though.
Jordan was the best scorer because Bill Wennington set the best screens. Get the fuck out of here. Anyway, Bar Fongool, August 26th, Thursday night. This is the most fun I've had on a Thursday night since the NBA playoffs. Gentlemen, Genius Cav, King Mike, anything last to say?
Yeah, I'll let you go first.
So we got a defensive lines next week because the future of the defensive line is interior pass rushers. Remember that.
It is.
It's always been about the lines, and quite honestly, Tom Brady's the one who made it so that it's all about the interior lineman. He was the first quarterback that was proof positive that if you had someone come up the middle, it changed his whole game. He
He never liked it. Right, Mike.
That's how the Giants beat him. They would have Tuck play defensive tackle at times and just everybody go up. And you put somebody up the middle, you get like Kev just said, you have a pass rusher up the middle. It's terrible. As Barkley would say, it's terrible. But it's
Interesting we ended with lines because you got to be doing lines if you think Barry was better than Emmitt. On that note, Bar Fongool, see you guys next Thursday. We're out.